Yes, sometimes my confidence would exceed my education or qualifications. This is a story from when I was in my 20s. I had hair on my head, Paula was healthy, and Michael was an only child. We'd been in Detroit for several years. I was washing windows for a living, and we were running our in home Bible study group. On Detroit's east side, there's a big lake, Lake St. Clair, and a couple in our Bible study group had a house right next to the water. They told me about the dock they used to have and the boat that they had to park elsewhere now because their dock was destroyed in an ice storm years ago. Many winters, the lake will freeze over so thick that folks will drive around on the ice, and when the ice breaks up in the spring, it often causes damage in one way or another. The ice sheets are so large and heavy. There are docks that have survived many winters, of course, but that particular year, he said that the ice had broken off all the pier posts in his area, leaving the tops of the posts just below the water level, quite dangerous to boats as they approached the shore. He told me if I could figure out a way to cut off those posts underwater down near the bottom of the lake, I could probably charge $20 a post and people would line up to pay me. That sounded like a fun challenge. Plus, we could sure use a few extra dollars for sweaters and books. First, I explored the options. Was there already a tool available to cut posts underwater? Well, there was. There were chainsaws that were pneumatic or hydraulic, and they were available for a huge amount of money. And there was a local firefighter who had one of those available to him, and he would cut the posts for you, but he was hard to get a hold of, and if you could get a hold of him, it was very expensive. I looked at the situation to see if I could figure out a way to cut them with some equipment that I could afford. The posts were in water about 5 to 7 foot deep, and they stood about 5 foot above the lake's bottom. The bottom was reasonably firm and fairly level. It sloped out a little bit as you got further from the shore. And the waves were, on a normal day, the waves were maybe a foot high or less. My first thoughts were about having some kind of pole-mounted chainsaw that I could operate from a boat. Those little pole chainsaws that you see now, I don't think they had made them yet back then. I thought about the boat's movement from the waves and decided that if that plan was going to work, there would have to be a way to clamp the saw mechanism to the post, and then the blade would swing through while it was held to the post. It was feasible, but still difficult to make, and I still would have been leaning over the side of the boat with the boat moving up and down, so that would have been difficult. Also, I didn't have a boat. It occurred to me that because the water wasn't very deep and it was fairly level, I could actually mount the saw to a ladder and just move the ladder into place and cut the post off while I was standing on the ladder if I could build the saw the right way. I started looking for a large chainsaw that I could modify, and the shaft coming out that normally spins the chain and the blade would be extended a number of feet, and the engine would be up out of the water, tilted on its side. The engine would turn a shaft that would go all the way down to the bottom of the post, and then the blade and the chainsaw bar would be mounted down there. So I started looking for a chainsaw, and I couldn't find a decent running chainsaw that I could afford. I don't remember how I got the idea of the boat motor. I think sometimes God gives me little hints and helps me point me in the right direction to get just the right thing. But I wound up buying an outboard motor that was affordable because the previous owner had run into some rocks and smashed the propeller as well as the lower gear housing. So to turn it back into a usable boat motor would have been very expensive, but it was perfect for me because the engine ran great, it started easily, and the shaft that came down from the motor just needed to be extended further down to the chainsaw blade. So I bought that and went to work modifying it to make a chainsaw out of it. Oh, another thing that was fun was that I actually had a water-cooled chainsaw, probably the only water-cooled chainsaw in the world. A buddy who was a foreman at a machine shop helped me make these two pieces of metal. They were made out of steel rectangles, and we drilled holes and threaded holes and things in these two pieces. The top one was to join to the bottom of the boat motor and join to the pipe that went down, and it was to have a connection between the metal rod in the middle and the bottom of the boat motor shaft that came down that had splines on it. At the bottom, we had the plate that had holes in it, had a hole and a bearing pressed in it so that the metal shaft could spin perfectly in the middle of that. And then it had holes to mount the chainsaw bar, and it even had a little hole in it for the oiling mechanism that chainsaws have that feed into the blade. I built an attachment for the ladder that the motor could clamp on, just like it would clamp on the transom of a boat. I moved it into position, lowered it over the seawall, and walked it out. I felt with my feet where the post was and got it in just the right position. Then I climbed up on the ladder, rested for a second, then said a little prayer and started the motor. The handle that you would ordinarily use to steer an outboard motor, in this case, was what moved the saw blade into the post. So as I began to pull that, I twisted it a little bit because on this one that was the throttle, gave it a little bit of gas and moved it in the direction to cut off the post. It moved really easily, and I thought, that blade probably came loose. So I turned the motor off and jumped off the ladder and went down there and felt around, and I was surprised to find out that it actually had cut the post off. Way easier than I thought it would have. There was something about the extra horsepower of the boat motor and the cutting underwater and maybe the condition of the wood of the posts or whatever, but as I cut those posts, it was much easier to cut through those posts than I ever would have thought it would be. Another great thing that worked out about using the boat motor, if I would have extended a shaft all the way from a chainsaw all the way to a blade, like 8 to 10 feet, that long rod would have started whipping in the middle like a jump rope without some sort of support in the middle. Another crazy thing about this story is that we were getting ready to leave the Detroit area and move away. We were already starting to pack up for that. And I can't believe I undertook a project like this in the middle of getting ready to move.